The G20 Labour and Employment Ministers meeting, which ended at the weekend, highlighted labour inequality as a concern in many societies across the world. Ministers from South Africa, Brazil and Spain vowed to work towards a fairer distribution of the products of labour globally. South African labour attaché to the United States, Siyabonga Hadebe, joins us now for more. Good to have you, Hadebe, and thank you very much for your time. The labour share on the decline since the 1980s. If you look at the South African context, what are the economic factors that are major contributors to that?
Good evening, Babamdluli. To begin with, let us just contextualize what this is talking about, what this entails. I'll just cite one study that was done by the World Bank not so long ago, where they compared a South African worker and a Vietnamese worker. This goes deep into the issues of apartheid spatial planning of pre-94. Where you find a worker that lives, say, in the former Wandebele or Haramkua in northwest of Pretoria, who has to spend, let's say, up to 40–50% of his monthly salary on transport. And then that is before taking care of the issues of the house, school fees and so on. So then this argument says that people don't want to subsidize the employer, meaning that people are getting less than what they should be earning, and what they get at the end of the day cannot satisfy their basic needs. That's what labor income share means. So in the context of South Africa, yes, we do have a problem like that, and we are observing that even in recent years, besides issues like your 2007 global crisis, as well as the COVID that took place a few years ago, this problem has been there. Remember, with us, it's more structural than caused by other factors, but external factors as well do contribute. So, yes, this is a problem that we are facing, and we feel that it needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
So in some instances, you'll find that in the South African context, there would be players, some of them already in the government of national unity, who would say that the drop in the share is not necessarily a representation of the rise in what capital owners are taking out. But the smaller share as far as the labor compensation, they would link that, as you've already mentioned, to some of the structural impediments, the drop in productivity, which they can pin on, for example, energy challenges that we have been having in the country, logistical challenges that we have been having in the country, spectrum not being made available, issues like a visa regime not necessarily being suitable. How do those fit into what I suppose Brazil and Spain are looking at?
Mr. Mdluli, the issue here that the three ministers are talking about is that we must move away from the market-led changes in the well-being of workers and try and look at what we would call a worker-centric or people-centered approach, meaning that even with all the problems that you've outlined, there is a need for a form of social dialogue. Institutions such as NEDLAC were formulated for that reason, and the bargaining councils and so on, so that the different parties can talk together to find an equitable way of sharing the benefit, the equitable way of maintaining jobs. It's not just a matter of free for all, as some people may argue. We've seen this in practice in Germany during COVID. They avoided a huge slashing of workers by using social dialogue. This is when people agree, we are going to work extra hours, we are going to work shorter hours, the employer would say, no, we cannot afford to do this and that, but there must be a dialogue. So what we are saying with this agreement, or with this dialogue that we are just starting with Spain and Brazil, is that we must encourage the institutions like collective bargaining and social dialogue to lead the process. So it's not a matter of just allowing the markets to take over, because that's not how things are not supposed to work.
So in that dialogue with the markets, are you saying part of the conversation that you would suggest, for example, is, as many others have said, just transition is good, but hold up on this thing of the just transition because of the impact that this will have on our labor markets. Others would say, hold up on digital migration because of what that would certainly represent as far as the labor share. Are those the kind of conversations you're talking about?
Exactly. When it comes to technology, for example, I'll give you one scenario. One lady called me the other day in South Africa because what you find with this new era that we are in is that employers tend to prefer to move away from the classical labor employment agreement, and going to contracts and sometimes employing people for the work that they are going to do. So that is not sustainable because people can be dismissed at a whim. People can be, their rights can be taken away from them because they don't have anyone to represent them, and some get fired. So what we are saying is that even with the emergence of AI, amongst others, we need to be quite careful as to how we go about doing this in order to preserve jobs and try to take everybody along. Because at this moment, you find that companies are willing to employ just about anyone across the world without observing any standard. It is one of the reasons that this actually what we are discussing with Brazil and Spain is a precursor to the discussion that is still going to take place at the International Labour Organization next June, where we are going to look at what is called platform economy, how these workers can be protected. These are so-called non-standard forms of employment. And we, as South Africa, we are not even close to developing our legislation to cope with these new demands that are created by things like Uber, for example, which in the country where I live, in Switzerland, has been a subject of huge debate, where the local courts in Geneva, they said workers for Uber are workers, they are not employers. And there was a standoff. Uber was suspended for a few months up until the Supreme Court in Bern decided that indeed these are people that need protection. So we are not even close to that. I mean, we've seen also recently people protesting in Spain against Airbnb for pushing up rentals. We know that in South Africa, the housing market is hitting the roof because everybody's chasing the last dollar that is available in the market. So these are some of the things that we think need to be looked at in an integrated fashion, including the just transition that we know the kind of issues that we have to deal with in South Africa. Of course, as South Africa, we are having too many problems when it comes to just transition. Both ends of just transition are affecting us. We have to run away from coal, and at the same time, we have to provide the so-called low-carbon minerals. So even there, we are experiencing issues. I mean, if you think about the kind of labor problems that we have in the Platinum Belt, in Katu and so on, these are the kind of issues that we would like to avoid. So pushing us too quickly into adopting some of these changes is causing a lot of problems, but also not just internally, but externally. Other countries like the US, Europe, they have also created laws that demand that goods that they have to import from countries are produced using non-fossil energies. So with us, with 80% of our electricity contributing to the economy, we are the obvious targets. We might be excluded from that. So we are asking that these things need to be done in a much more systematic, much more organized fashion rather than being imposed externally, because meeting other people's standards, we are not the same.
Yeah.
So we are saying that labor has to be, labor concerns and community concerns have to be in the forefront.
Speaking about abandoning traditional models, so far some of the instruments, for example, that are tried to be used are redress policies, things like employment equity policies. What is the view of how those instruments are going to be used in the future?
Well, you know, what we are experiencing across the globe, that's why we came together with Spain and Brazil, is that we need to address inequalities together with their intersectionalities that involve race, gender, and so on. So we cannot have these measures removed completely from the job market or from the labor market, because what we see is that inequalities are deepening within countries. They are also deepening between races. They are deepening between countries, regions, and so on. So something must be done. So we are not going to promise that anything like employment equity is going to go anytime soon.
And there are those then who are saying, look, these policies, these regulations, as you're saying, you want a deregulated environment, are actually hampering the growth, especially in the context of South Africa, in the sense that it makes it difficult for business to do business. So ease of doing business is hampered. And I know you're saying markets can't dictate. How do you then approach that and say you still want to see growth, yet you want to limit the role of unions, if you like?
Well, Thabo, if you understand, the role of government is quite complex in that we have to live with these contradictions or what seems like contradictions. But the view that is now being embraced across the world is that we need to put people first. If we are saying people must be taken to the market, who are the markets? Do they have a face? Do they have feelings? Do they see when people are not getting suitable transport to come from their homes to work? They don't. I do not think that they can see. If you can define for me who is a market, then I would be able to maybe to have another conversation. But from the understanding that we have is that markets could be fictitious, could be people, could be whomever, but their role is to make profit. And now the existence of unions and labor laws is to have a counterweight to the power that the owners of capital have.
Yeah.
And what you are talking about is not a new debate. Just last year in the International Labour Organization, we had a huge confrontation between workers and employers who were arguing that some of the conventions of the International Labour Organization, as well as international law as it stands, do not make provision for the right to strike. But we as South Africa, we've got a right to strike in our own constitution.
Yeah.
So ordinarily that made us the first or amongst the first countries to sponsor the referral of this dispute to the International Court of Justice. I know that people are familiar with the Israeli issue that we've taken to the Court of Justice, but we are also involved in another one that deals with these labor issues, the right to strike in the context of what is called Convention 87 of the International Labour Organization. So these discussions are taking place everywhere. It's not only a matter of South Africa. Everybody's concerned that with the decline of labor unions and with the coming of AI and other new innovations in the labor market, the value of a worker is getting diminished quite quickly. And that in turn leads to poverty. And I do not believe that everyone would want to see economic growth where everybody is poor and cannot even move and hungry.
Yeah, I had a round table with Labour and an economist at one point, and we tried to ask this question that you just asked: who is the market? Where they say the market are those things that, for example, will drive the cost of of fuel to go up. The markets are those things which will make the cost of borrowing to go up. Those are the markets. Those are the people that affect the rand. Whether they have a face or not is another question. And the markets have also been the excuse that has been given, or shall I say the reason that has been given for austerity measures. And how are the austerity measures being approached in other countries?
Well, the debate is there and has been there for many, many years on austerity measures across the world. I mean, countries like Ghana have got a story to tell, Mexico and all of them. Of course, that's why you'll find that there are too many political swings in Latin America. It comes from these ideological divides that are existing across the world. I mean, we have Argentina that was admitted to BRICS not so long ago, then they declined because the government changed to the one that is pro-market. In fact, that government is amongst that were saying, well, you can't talk about something called social justice because that is pro-market. No, that is anti-market. So it's more ideological. But when you go to other countries that deal with markets and state where they tend to live comfortably together, you find that they do have some promising outcomes in terms of dealing with certain problems. I mean, mainland Europe is known for that balance. They are not purely market-oriented, but the state still has got a bigger role to play, something that in our country some people feel that government shouldn't touch anything, and which is not quite, it has not worked anyway. I mean, even now in the UK, people are dismissing some of the austerities that were introduced by Margaret Thatcher in the 80s, and they haven't worked. Yeah. So energy is going through the roof, poverty is skyrocketing. So we need a balance. That's what we are saying, and all other countries are showing us that the balance is a must. We cannot just go with one.
Sure would make for interesting debate with the Minister at Treasury. Let's leave it there.
Yes. I understand. There are these dichotomies in public policy, and I think we have to learn to live with them. We, as the Department of Labour, we tend to look after the welfare of workers, and that's our mandate.
Baba Hadebe, much appreciated. Thank you very much for coming on. Siyabonga Hadebe, Labour Attaché, South African Permanent Mission to the United Nations.